It is the definition of ourself as the body for one lifetime that's at the bottom of the entire money, sex, and power. And that's why I used the word I used. Because the world we live in sees raw power. And that means raw sex, because I can buy it once I have money. And that means money is the way you buy everything with no conscience. And that means I can let my animal consume whatever it wants, because after all, this is a disposable planet. But we're going to have to be very careful not to misuse it. So the calling religion Dharma is the same problem as calling Dharma religion. It's just replicating it. But what we need to do is revive the way we speak in English and bring the Sanskrit words in very carefully so they're not distorted and their distinctive meaning is not lost. And we need to stand firmly on the ground that the same principles have not been taught in all cultures. Trying to be one with everyone just to make peace is not the answer. Making peace is something you decide by seeing them as the Atma, and they can feel it in your demeanor. The enemy of all human beings is our not knowing. And the more we know that allows us to work in cooperation with each other and nature, the better we are. Thank you, Sandy. Namaste to everyone. Thank you for joining us. Wonderful to see you again and again. And this is otherwise known in the Vedic culture as darshan, from drishti, which means to see. And it works two ways. One is we get together and can see each other to have the exchange. And the other is that the exchange should leave us with better eyesight in our third eye. That's the one we're working on. So you might call this ocular development for the third eye impaired, or rather, learning to see what's there but not obviously visible. Money, sex, and power. Well, the title could not be more blatant. And it is because, of course, the subject we want to talk about is ancient, but its current form has changed and is twisted. But before I go further, this particular mantra is very apropos of this conversation. Om Guru Brahma, Guru Vishnu, Guru Devo, Maheshvaraha, Guru Sakshad, Para Brahma, Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha. We looked at the right side, the left side, and the middle in that mantra. We talked to Shiva, Durga, and matter and entropy, left side. Brahma and Saraswati, creativity and bringing things into manifestation, right side. And we addressed Vishnu and Lakshmi, the middle path that brings balance to them. This is, of course, also the three gunas of creativity, destruction, and balance. And in many ways, the puzzle for this conversation is how do we take from nature and those around us in the just right way so that we are successful and have the things that we need. After all, the thing we should be asking is, isn't this a strange world where you have to go out and fight for your food? What a strange thing to be born on a planet where at first somebody feeds you, that's just to make sure you stay, and then you have to go out and find your own food. And the thing about being human is there's no obvious food. In some ways, we're the species that can eat anything, whereas every other species only has certain food. It's quite an interesting puzzle. And that puzzle is obscured by the moment in history in which you're living. So think of the three gunas again, and think of the three gunas being an incline, where at the top of it, you're maintaining the balance of nature. In the middle part of it, you're mostly thinking about what you're getting for yourself. And in the bottom end of that incline, you're at the most animalistic, least human nature. There's a very interesting coincidence linguistically. Those three have been represented in various cultures in various ways. One of the ways you might have heard of them is the left and right hand path. The left hand path leading through dark methods to destruction. The right hand path, after all, being the right one, the one heading in the correct direction. But we hungry humans have what are known in yoga as the four animal propensities, just like everyone else. And those are called eating, sleeping, mating, and defending. Those are the four animal propensities. We have them, can't help but have to have them to be here, have to eat, have to sleep, have to mate, and have to defend. And astrology gives the secret away. The zodiac, aka the zodiac, is called the circle of animals. The circle of animals means that each one of us, due to our karma, has actually been born with a particular animal that unknowingly we're riding. We're actually like the centaur. The centaur, by the way, came from Indian soldiers from Rajasthan going to Greece, and the Indian warriors lived on their horse. And they were such good horseback riders and so inextricably woven in with their horse's destiny that they came to be seen as non-different from each other. So the half man, half horse was a poetic depiction of these amazing warriors. And it's a well-known fact that the way that warriors would do this is the horse would be a mare, and they would have a leather pouch, and the mare would have given birth to a colt before going on the journey as the carrier of the soldier. So she would still be lactating. And like a cow, the soldier would milk the mare every day, put the mare's milk in a leather pouch that was kept by the withers of the horse. That's the part right where your knee touches. And that is where the horse sweats when you ride them. That would clabber the milk, and the milk would make cheese and buttermilk. And at night, the soldier would live on the mare's milk, or in the course of the day. And this was the symbiosis between the animal and the human. And of course, they were expert bowmen, and they and the Mongols had this. It's a technique where you make reins, and then you make a special set of reins that are steadied on the wither of the horse for going forward, and a special set of stirrups that stick out to the side. So at a full gallop, you can stand up on the horse with your feet in the stirrups that are right at the top of the saddle, and you can shoot arrows at your enemy with the horse going forward and you shooting backward. And in this way, an enemy cannot pursue you. So the reason I'm telling you these stories is that we have to begin this story not where we are, or we won't have perspective. We have to begin it where the planet has been for hundreds of thousands of years. With our enterprising and entrepreneurial behavior being very much close and connected to the earth, number one. And number two, we lived with our animal nature. We were intimately connected with the animals of life all the time. And there was no such thing as life without that. And now there's a couple of things missing in our physical life that make a lot of philosophical concepts very difficult for us to truly grasp. That's because fire is no longer a part of our life. We have a gas stove or an electric stove, and it's really not fire, because a fire is something you have to light and tend to and watch out for sparks and then deal with the ashes. And a fire keeps you in the cycle of life, because you have to go out, get the wood from the trees, then bring the wood in, then build the fire. And there weren't matches, so you had to know how to build a fire. And then the ashes have all the minerals from the tree, so you have to then put that back into the soil. So I'm trying to get you to have a feeling for a moment, not of our modern context of enterprising and activity and business and corporate life and what we call enterprise and entrepreneurship, because that changed shape about 400 years ago as the colonial era began. So up until that time, there was a lack of mobility in most areas. Very difficult to get a large army and march it, an army of 300,000 soldiers, hundreds and thousands of miles. Imagine how difficult it would be to find food. There's no grocery stores. So this is ancient entrepreneurial activity in that you were very close to the laws of nature and aware of them in everything that you did. That's a very important thing to understand, because our animal that we were riding metaphorically, our chart, gave us a particular nature and set of capabilities. And that nature and set of capabilities was actually the first thing everyone wanted to find out when you were young, so that they would know how to educate you, so that you could, as quickly as possible, get to a high level of skill and ability in your particular nature's skill sets. And there were basically four. There were those who were best used as scholars and intellectuals. There were those who had the athletic ability, force, will, determination, and a protective nature, and that's the warrior class. And then there were those who were good at growing food crops, working with animals, an essential part of that skill set, and exchange of goods and the keeping track of those products of well-being, because they were the wealth. If you can't eat it, in ancient times, it's really not that useful. You may have gold, but if you can't eat it and store it and keep it and have it around at your disposal, you're not wealthy. And if you can build upon land and occupy land and then have those resources, but if you don't work in a symbiotic society, if you're not a culture of symbiotes, then you're not going to succeed. So this means you have to have relations with all the different components. And the fourth one is those with a particular single skill set who plug into a situation. Call them the workers who have a particular skill set. Now, according to the Vedas, every one of us, usually, is born with one of those four propensities, one of those four natures, and we're sitting on a particular kind of animal. This is what astrology was really about. It was about two things, of course: understanding that we're in a long stream of cause and effect, and that because we're immortal beings, we go from life to life changing cars. This body in Sanskrit is called the karana, changing automobiles. And, of course, eating, sleeping, mating, and fighting are the four fundamental activities of our animal nature. But we can rise beyond those to do particular things with our creative energy that the rest of the animal kingdom cannot do. So you've heard the word for that, prehensile. That's before you get a movable thumb. And with this movable thumb, we have an ability to dominate all of life. We're at the top of the food chain. This is what used to be called then the social body. The social body was the clearly demarcated by ability head of society, where the knowledge reposed, protectors of society, where the power resided, feeders of society, where all the goods worth exchanging were produced, managed, and passed around, with gold and silver being the precursor to what we call money. In fact, in my lifetime, I can remember 70 years ago, I can remember going to the bank with a silver certificate, AKA a dollar in the US, where I was born, and asking for a silver dollar. It was called a silver certificate. It wasn't called money. It was called a silver certificate. It was a proxy for an ounce of silver, a silver coin that was kept at the bank, that you could say, give me my silver instead, and they would. So in my lifetime, we have transitioned from that. I don't think you'll find anyone over the age, well, I know, over the age of about 60 who had that experience, because it went to dollar when it slid away from silver certificate. But what's all this got to do with money, sex, and power? Well, everything. If you don't have the context right, then this conversation won't be really helpful to you. So you see, for all of time until just the last 50 years, human life consisted of identifying a skill set that you were going to get very good at, mastering that skill set, and then being that role in the social body in the very same way that we have body parts. We have legs. So those with just skills were the legs of the social body, called Shudra. Those with all of the collecting and storing and managing of wealth properties were called Vaishya. That's the belly of society. The protectors and those who repel enemies, the immune system of the social body, were called Kshatriya, which means to hurt and protect. Two things. You could either hurt and or simultaneously hurt some to protect others. So they were the immune system of the social body. And then the department that carried the knowledge of society forward was called Brahmin, because in India, Brahman is where we all come from. And we're immortal beings, Atmas, from that realm. So again, I want you to think for a moment. What I'm saying right now does not exist for Western civilization. Never did. It only existed by accident because those categories are still there. But they weren't looked at in this organized way. And this is where we've gotten into what we now call political systems. There's really only one successful political system, and that's when everyone in the social body is healthy and doing the thing they're meant to do and doing things that benefit the whole of society. So I didn't want to go into this conversation without showing you the context, because otherwise you would apply it to the perverted corporate world that we think is normal now, because we've become inured to it. And so what I want you to know at the beginning of this is that the word to colonize, which means essentially to go and take what other people have because you have a right to. So the colonial era was started by the Catholic Church with the papal bull that said any Catholic may go anywhere in the world that is not Christian, enslave the people, take what they have by force, own it, and take all of the resources, the land, the wealth, everything, and give a percentage to the church, no doubt. But then also, you may enslave those people because they are really not human. They're persona non grata. They're not really persons because they're not Christian, Catholic in particular. So that colonization, what I want you to understand, is that the word enterprise and entrepreneur all have to do with using our ability to manipulate our thumb to colonize, steal, take, enslave, and dominate. So what you need to understand is that the corporation, as we now call it, is just a smaller form of the same incorporation that the Pope granted to the world, because those corporations are chartered with a board of directors overlooking their exploitation of the planet and their taking of all of the resources that they can get. Their success is measured in how much resources they got. There is a CEO, the head, titular head of the corporation. There's a CFO, more in charge of the will this work or will this not work, business plans, all of that, and of course, money. Now there's one department missing, CCO, Chief Conscience Officer. When I worked at corporations, I'd already been in the ashram, so I called them corpsoration, that dead place I go each day. Why did I say that? Because I knew intuitively, not with as much focus and intellectual backing as I now have, I knew that the corporations were still just there to get as much money as they could. In other words, they were there for money, sex, and power. That was it. And they were still extracting the resources of the planet without conscience, without a cyclic behavioral attitude, without a cultural ethos that saw many lifetimes of evolution for all of the citizens, without a worldview that saw the animals and every living entity as atmas just like we are. None of that is present in the corporate model. So, of course, you could easily ask me, then why are you trying to help people be successful by empowering them through yoga to continue exploiting? And the answer, of course, is because yoga doesn't exploit. That's the whole point. So, unless we change the cultural context, then the lowest common denominator is that money buys me everything that I want. Money, sex, and power I can buy. Now, the extent to which your humanity has awakened to its full potential, then you begin to realize that that doesn't give you permanent satisfaction, that it's just temporary, and that it's your animal running the show and not your human. So it's very important to understand that there was a civilization on our planet, what we now call India, what was then called Bharat. And that Bharat, that place, viewed all the people in the society as beings whose abilities and work and relationship to society needed to be integrated into society. So you might say they cared for every citizen. They had a system of governance that encouraged what we now call entrepreneurial skills, in that it was with the skill sets that you developed that you were accomplishing everything. But now let's give a yogic name for that. The Sanskrit name for all the things we do that are successful is that they are adhering to the ritam. The ritam is the laws of nature encoded into matter, or prakriti, that mean that everything works based on cause and effect. Now, think about that for a moment. Which part of your automobile could you take out without the car getting distorted? Is there an engine part you could just remove? Any serious engine part? No. Is there a part of the steering you could remove? No. All the parts in the automobile have been put together so that the entirety of the automobile will work as a single unit, which means it's following the laws of nature, the ritam. So, yoga is simply the worldview that says the following. First, that we're immortal beings from a realm called Brahman. We've chosen to come and experience the other realm called Prakriti, where everything is temporary and governed by rules known as the ritam, or the laws of nature. Therefore, everything there happens within time, has a limited duration, watch the left and right, has a beginning, and develops and produces byproducts and withers and dies, three gunas. At the beginning is born, the creative impulse. Then it begins to undergo entropy, but for a while it's at its best. And then the entropy is called aging and wearing out. And everything here does that. This means there's nothing new about developing a skill set and going out into the world and extracting energy with that skill set. That's called life. And a highly sophisticated culture, the components that were needed in the social body were understood exactly like a doctor would understand them in our physical body. Can we remove the lungs and still have a functioning body? No. The liver? No. Kidneys? No. None of the essentials. So just think of these essential social bodies. Now think for a moment, score our modern world on how we're managing the social body. Think about it. How are we doing? Taking good care of it? Managing it? Making certain that every adult, if they're willing to have it, has been trained in a skill set that makes them a valuable part of the body, the social body? No. We don't have that. We complicate that by names like socialism and capitalism and this and that. Naming in a way to gain, it's a power game we're playing over who wants to own the whole mechanism. Great, well, what if you had 10 feet? Would that be improvement? If everybody was the feet? No. Now your hands are feet. That's not helpful. That's prehensile. That's called a four-legged. So this entrepreneur is when you have an opposable thumb, you realize you're the Atma, you're riding an animal, and that gives you particular skill sets that if they're cultivated, they will integrate into society and make you successful, make society successful, and then that successful society, if it's properly constituted, will think of the next generation while they're making the next generation and make sure that the world is ready to receive that next generation. So this is made as something that goes forward through time and functions in spite of the fact that all the components die off. New ones take their place. So this is the definition, which you do not know, I did not know, you have never seen, I have never seen, only heard of. But I see the evidence of the truth of all of those statements. But in your education, were you carefully managed and tested at the very beginning and first had someone look at your chart, the blueprint of what you came in to be, and make suggestions on that? And then as you were growing up, were you put through a program of finding out which of the 4 departments you were most inclined toward so you would be happy doing the thing that you're best at and that you like? And was that particular skill set developed in you so that you would be highly, highly developed in that skill set? Is this what education was like? Or did they throw a bunch of crap at you in textbooks that just gave you information and no guidance and no idea of who you were and no understanding of the longer journey or the longer purpose? Because that wasn't the education department's job. That was the church's job. So they were competing against each other, and the church didn't help because they only talked about one life. I really want you to understand, because as you become what I call a mantrapreneur, you will go from entre-manure and entrepreneur to mantrapreneur. And that is the word that I invented for a yogi who is also a business person. What is a business person? Let's give it its correct name. Someone who cooperates with the Ritam. That's all. According to what? Their varna, their particular ability. And remember, the Shudras are the legs of society. So shall we get rid of our legs or treat them with respect? And then the Vaishyas are the belly of society. The whole moving forward by having to eat and have possessions and all of that, that's that department. Finance, handling wealth, handling food, handling animals, all of that, growing crops. Now, hasn't that switched over? And aren't we in a world right now where people like Bill Gates are trying to completely automate agriculture globally and remove it entirely from human contact? Have it all done with machines? But you see, the problem is that all of the corporations of our world right now still have simply changed their name from colonizers to enterprises. That's all. And we think enterprise is different than colonize. Because we've been told enterprise is normal, but we've also been raised in colonize is too. Why? Well, it started out because we're Christians and we're the best, and we get to do this because the Pope said so, Daddy said so. Now, money, sex, and power. Well, see, that's just our animal nature talking. Of course, we need to exchange various substances. Why? Because we're the most complex animal. This is also why colonization took place, because they had fragrant spices in parts of the world that were previously mostly inaccessible. You could bring a camel load of things over to somewhere, but you couldn't get there and bring back a huge amount of things. So it wasn't until human beings reached about, the 15th century, little around that area, this universal use of gunpowder for force and universal ships that could go everywhere and transport things started this human greed escalating to the level we're living at now, to the point that we think that an entrepreneur is an honorable thing to be. That just sucking the life out of the planet in one generation is the right way to go about things. Now, I took this path into the subject because a yogi knows the following. They know that the first thing to learn is your varna, then your dosha, your body type, so you know which foods are compatible with your particular body. So now this is all about cooperation. It's not about the rape, pillage, steal, rob, and take with no future. Just taking has no future. Just taking eats the future. And what does it do? It gives you money, sex, and power. It holds and dangles in front of you the chance as a human to exercise your animal nature unlimitedly instead of under restriction. So now we have the next definition. To be the human animal is to restrict the animal and ride on top of it as the Atma, as the one in charge. So therefore, control of our senses, not to be dragged by our senses, is the basis of yoga. Now, if we had time, we would go through Patanjali's Yoga Sutras, and we would go one at a time into yams, niyams, which is lifestyle. You couldn't begin, now we let everyone begin yoga if they're healthy enough to do asanas. No yoga teacher in the past would ever do such a thing. First, the teacher would become your guru and tell you your lifestyle. No variance on this. You don't do it, you don't learn yoga. Go home. Otherwise, they would give you your diet, give you your lifestyle. You'd have a consultation with an Ayurvedic doctor who would recommend the right diet for you. You would not eat meat, full stop. You would not use alcohol or intoxicants, full stop. You would divest yourself of all unnecessary addictions. And then you would begin to alter the way you inhabit your body. And you would be taught that you're the Atma. Is that happening in yoga classes these days? No, not at all. It's your asana, your cute asana. It's not your Atma. It's your Atma. No. I've got to say, because it's the culture, not me, that's become crass. And I want you to understand this. It is the definition of ourself as the body for one lifetime that's at the bottom of the entire money, sex, and power. And that's why I used the word I used. Because the world we live in sees raw power. And that means raw sex because I can buy it once I have money. And that means money is the way you buy everything with no conscience. And that means I can let my animal consume whatever it wants because after all, this is a disposable planet. So yes, I purposely used a word that's not sattvic, just to see if you were paying attention. Because that's the point. It is the degradation of us from sattvic, as my wonderful partner quickly pointed out, to the rajasic, and saying, it's okay, I'm human. These are my human desires and needs, to the animal. We have instituted this as normal. We're calling this government. We're calling the atrocious and terrible warfare, these tamasic behaviors, we're calling that normal. And rajasic is extraordinary. And remember what rajas does. It manipulates nature using the laws of nature successfully. So what's the difference between that and yoga? In yoga, we work with the laws of nature, manipulating them so that we only extract what is necessary for our living, and we leave the rest behind, and we work on a cyclic basis, knowing that we are working for the planet to endure. Mantrapreneur. In that case, of course, you know that I think it's useful that the hundreds of millions of ladies, and I did not mean to slight them, who have taken to yoga are an alarm call for a different reason. They're saying, hey, this society doesn't know anything about the feminine divine. And intuitively, they're saying, I was born in a complex mechanism. You haven't told me anything to do with it that I should have known. And these people, these wonderful people teaching me yoga are. So in fact, in an emergency, you have to start with asana because you can't start with lifestyle because you can't control the lifestyle. But this is what I want you to see. So it's a wonderful renaissance that all of this yoga is going on, in spite of the fact that it's not starting correctly. The point is, it's starting. And that's remarkable. On the basis of that asana then, the pranayama comes next, and suggestions about lifestyle are coming next. And this COVID so-called crisis that we're in is really a crisis of lifestyle. None of this would have occurred as a social phenomenon if an emphasis in society was upon lifestyle, well-being, vitamin D, zinc, other things that everyone should be having, an arrangement made for every citizen to have access to those things that create well-being, and an attempt to find them work that matches their nature. Do we call this communism? I don't think so. I think we call this yogaism. We call this Vedicism. We call this the long view. And then what enterprise is extracting and keeping just the right amount of energy and circulating the rest. The mistaken word in English, charity. The correct word in Sanskrit, dhanam. Dhanam doesn't mean charity. It means circulating energy all throughout the social body, as if the whole social body is a being with a state of health or not. So look at our social body right now. How are we doing? Look at the companies, so-called entrepreneurs, selling junk food, toxic, poisonous junk food. So if I suggested to McDonald's that all of its employees start doing yoga, do you think they would do that? Would that match their ethos? You know, hamburger, a Coke, some fries, and some yoga. That's perfect. Eat food that kills you and try to bring your body back to life at least. So you see, this conversation, I should be doing this on national television. I should be saying, why aren't we holding all the corporations accountable to redistribute a certain amount of the wealth they're extracting? And you know where I'm going. Because the fossil fuel bubble that has maintained our temporary divorce from fire is just about over. The next stage cannot be aggressive in the way this one has been. And right now we're maxed out on plastic in the oceans. We're maxed out on fishing them till there's nothing left. We've done this so badly, there may be a catastrophic era for 100 years before everything grows back. It's possible. It's also possible that we can all start talking about this just as I'm talking about it right now. You don't have to be a rocket scientist to get this. Everyone's an immortal being. They're all valuable. The planet is an entity. We need to work together to hold that entity together for everyone's well-being. It's called loka samgraha. Where you are, that's the loka you're in. your location, Sanskrit word loka. Hold the loka together. So as you walk through each day, do whatever you have to do to hold life together as you can see it needs to be held. So what I really designed these classes for, aside from money, sex, and power, you are not going to give up money, some exchangeable form of wealth. Yoga doesn't say there's anything wrong with sexuality. Yoga simply says anything that you get from nature you can utilize in a divine state of being, or you can degrade yourself with it. Why? It's called the gunas. Rajas can make you go up if you aim that way, and rajas can degrade you with entropy and drag you down if you let yourself be dragged that way. If you don't go up, you will go down. That's the law of nature. That's the law of entropy. If you don't make arrangements to go from selfish to broad-minded and with a wider scope of vision, then you will be an extendable, selfish what? So I'd like to give you a word for this. Two kinds of human beings on Mata Bhumi. Parasite and symbiote. Raise your hand. Which are you? I know the answer with all of you. When did you decide to be a symbiote and not a parasite? Think about it. At what age did you begin to go, something's really wrong here? I don't know what exactly to do, but I've got to do something. And you changed sides psychologically. You said, okay, I just can't join in with the army of ants devouring our planet with no regard for its future. And this led you one thing to another thing, to another thing, to a yoga class, to something. But what's really happening right now is as we are confronted with a planet brought to it the brink of peril by entrepreneurs, we are now, if we're paying attention, seeing what's going on. And the media has, it's almost as if the devas said, we better give them technology so they can see everything, because we need all of them to see what they're doing so they can all change their mind. It's possible right now that just what I'm saying, which is just very standard, basic Vedic knowing, any Vedic teacher could do what I'm doing right now. They just have to speak it in the right sequence. Anyone who sees this has got the picture now, that they've got to hold a many lifetime view for themselves and the planet. That they've got to say to the planet, I'm a symbiote with you, not a parasite. I'm not sucking you dry and here to take what I can. We have to look at each other and say, namaste, I see you're an immortal being. I respect you for that, and therefore, I'm a mantrapreneur. We all together, using the ritam, have to extract from the earth and give back to the earth each year. Take, give back. Take, give back. Where in our world is take and give back? It's coming up on supposed Christmas. Did you know that Christmas, Chris is Krishna? It's not Christ. Christ is an English word that came from the Greek, Christos, and Christos is Krishna. And in the Bhagavad Gita, Krishna says November, December, that's my months. Those 2 months are Krishna mas, month, Krishna's month. So November, December are Krishna's month. Why? Because the earth shuts down. And what are you supposed to do when the earth is resting? Go within, my friends. Go within. That's yoga. You're supposed to live each day with a rhythm like that also. There's a time in each day to go within, to restore your concept of who you are, to make a promise to the earth. I'm going to work for your benefit, not just extract from you. I'm not going to use my skills. So now we're going to put a name on this. When we sit down in the morning and we're a yogi, that's called Ashtanga Yoga. Whenever we park and readjust the vehicle with various skill sets and bring it to a state of harmonious balance and sattva, that is Ashtanga Yoga. In fact, in reality, in India, that's intermingled with all the other yogas. And some people master it to the highest level. But everyone learned it, grade school. In a proper world, everyone would learn to inhabit their body correctly in grade school. Before they did sports and before they did all of these things, you probably know this, maybe you don't, but sports as they're practiced in Western civilization cause huge amounts of damage and disability in human beings because they play dangerous, crashing into each other sports that dislocate, break, and damage parts of the bodies of the children. They do that to win, and the children all lose by going into adulthood broken and twisted and damaged and disabled, and with the habit of breaking and twisting and damaging and disabling as if that is normal. Rather than before, during, and after every sporting event, the well-being. You know, this is what they do in Kung Fu. I don't know if you've ever used Tiger Balm, but Tiger Balm is a medicine from Kung Fu. When you go to do martial arts practice, first you warm up. And even while you're warming up, the teacher walks around and goes, how's that? Are you okay there? Are you fine there? There's literally a doctor on premise when you're doing martial art, or the martial art master has mastered enough medicine, they can tell, like a chiropractor, when you're in shape and out of shape and dislocated or correctly located. Because martial arts is just yoga with a different purpose, with the purpose of action and protection. And so you're going to apply it differently. But at the end of every Kung Fu session in true Kung Fu, you do the medical part. You don't leave the dojo, you don't leave the place of practice without restoring the body as far as possible and having medicines that do that, having creams that do that, so that there's a restoration cycle at the end of each use cycle. That's yoga. That's martial arts practiced as yoga. So really, if you can just isolate these principles, then we can use this knowledge to go forward with a new kind of entrepreneurial activity. And that's what I'm calling the mantrapreneurs activity. Because then we become a symbiote on the planet and not a parasite. Short-term thinking is, I'm hungry, kill the host, I was fine, I had a good meal, game over. That's exactly what we're doing to Mother Earth right now, to Mata Bhumi. And so all of you, no matter what your final and ultimate meditation is, if you get this part, you can now become a representative of entrepreneurialism. Go out into the workplace in the voice of this and say, well, look, we're doing things in a way that's not as balanced as it could be. May I suggest we do the following? Because we're not going to scrap work. We're not going to stop enterprise. We're not going to stop the things we're doing, extracting energy. That's what it means to be here. Just like we're going to ride an animal. We're riding an animal. So we're going to eat, we're going to sleep, we're going to mate, and we're going to defend. And not only mate, but sexuality, and this is an important point that hasn't been talked about much by the Indian community. So I want to spend a little time on it with you. But sexuality is actually got two sources. One source is the animal nature, which simply is the evidence that we're composed of animal parts in the body, and they're talking to us constantly. To hear beyond that voice and to ask the question, all right, I feel that pull. What can I do to refine that pull? That's called yoga. And it's also known as the Kundalini. Naturally, because of gravity, the Kundalini will hang out in the lower chakras. You know, that's called the Kundalini, and no shock value in this next word, but the inappropriate English term, ladies, kund, is from kunda. Kunda in Sanskrit means the fire pit. Fire pit is where you make the offering and have a baby. So originally that word was a descriptive term of the lower end of the Kundalini. It's the kunda. The kunda is not a dirty word. You can see that English has subverted all of this. But the Kundalini is that if you don't alter it, the life force in a human body will reside in the animal regions, which is below the navel. And it'll operate just from there mostly. The paradox with humans is our brain gets so active that it splits us between the lower half and the upper half. And anything that integrates those two allows the Kundalini to flow from its animal nature to be refined, rejuvenated, brought up to the navel, brought up to the heart, brought up to the throat, brought up to even include and open the third eye. And then the 1,000-petal lotus is the potential that is beyond our grasp right at this moment of what's possible in Brahman. So as a mantrapreneur, you would still continue to use the principles of extraction, because extraction is the basis of living on matter. But a parasite extracts to the death of the host. A symbiote has a reciprocal relationship with the host and benefits the host while getting benefit from the host. So honestly, I'd like to go out into the world and train a whole new group of entrepreneurs and say, listen, the colonial period is finished. We're about to run out of fossil fuel. This mad rush to suck our planet dry of life is finished. It's failed. It's succeeded and gotten us to this level. Now, we will fail if we don't go to the next level. And that's what's in front of us. It's pointless just to complain about colonization and our ancestors and all of that. That's behind us now. The question is, how do we get paid to be symbiotes rather than parasites? And how do we speak in such a way that we bring symbiotic behavior into the vocabulary? And I'm going to tell you the Sanskrit again. It's called loka samgraha, holding the world together. So while we're eating, sleeping, mating, and defending, while we're having money, sex, and power, which is fine in the right tone of voice, you have to have some wealth, you have to have some pleasure, and you have to make babies, and you have to have power in order to live. So what's missing is refinement. And again, I'm going to say this from Patanjali's perspective. Remember that the Yoga Sutras of Patanjali begins Atha Yoga Anushashanam. Listen carefully. Now, and now doesn't mean whatever now you decide. Now means now that this person has decided to become a symbiote, let's do yoga. They're no longer just an animal. They've actually decided that they're the Atma, and they've been informed about that. They agree, and they have a split purpose in their activities now. One is extraction, because you can't live here without it, and the other is recycling and circulation. Recycling is the life force going up the spine from the kunda, from the very base, from the fire pit, going up across the top, and if you put your tongue on the roof of your mouth, it keeps going, and it goes down the front. It's called circulating your energy. So when the human energy gets locked in on a target that is greedy for, and is being pulled toward that target, the yogi unplugs. What's that called? When you unplug and then plug within, turtle legs going in, pratyahara. You pratyahara, you go. You point it this way. You go, ho. Now the energy's pointed inward rather than outward. If you don't do this for a certain amount of time each day, you don't practice. But if you do, then you put the tongue in the roof of the mouth, lock the Kegel muscles in the genital, in the prostatic genital area, that anal sphincter muscle that you can squeeze, that squeezable sphincter muscle down there, and your tongue on the roof of your mouth signals the energy go up instead of going down. You lock off the bottom and you point it up, and it goes, whew. So this is yoga. Then it crests over the back of the top of the head, goes down the front, and opens the eye of discernment. And now that steadied us. That steadies our balance, because it's the balance that we're trying to embody. So this is otherwise known. The next part is known as karma yoga. The yoga that you practice while you are doing the most complicated thing. Kind of like being a tightrope walker on a motorcycle, on a one-wheeled bicycle, going across the cable while drinking tea. Welcome to being human. We're multitaskers. And after a while, we learned that. So here's the secret. So when Hatha Yoga Anushashanam, when the person is ready, the guru says, yes, I accept you as student, begin with this. And of course, it's the yams and niyams, so that your lifestyle encourages what you're trying to do. If you eat the wrong foods, if you eat at the wrong time, if you don't have the right way of living, then the unbalances from that will unbalance you and you won't be able to do yoga. So yams and niyams. And now we're ready for the next verse. Listen carefully. This is the defining verse. Yogas chit vritti nirodha. Yoga is removing the places where we have become twisted for some reason. And after all, remember, our planet is twisting. All the planets are orbiting. Everything cyclic is twisting us. Cycles are twisting us. So there are many reasons we could get twisted here. And those twists are called vrittis. Yogas, chit. Chit is the consciousness of our Atma. Vritti, the twistedness of the world, has overtaken our consciousness from our Atma, and it's now twisted. So yogas chit vritti nirodha, yoga is untwisting the consciousness from the vrittis that are containing it and twist it around it and subverting it and distorting it. Now, when I made this next linguistic jump, I laughed for 2 weeks. It took me quite a while to get to understand this, and I'm the first, I think, person who has. But the word advertisement is vritti, vert. Advertisement. Advertisement, which is the key to enterprise and entrepreneurial behavior, is twisting the consciousness of people subconsciously so that they will unconsciously do what you want them to do, which is, of course, consume your nasty product. So, advertisements are humans purposely placing vrittis inside of the minds of other humans. Here's how it works. A family, a husband and wife, 2 kids, in a clean, nice-looking automobile are driving along and laughing and talking to each other, and the kids are giggling in the back seat and playing with a toy. And you've just got a few seconds forward to go to end the commercial and put in the final vritti, and the car moves forward and it says somebody's name. This brand, that brand, that brand, that brand. Got you in the mood, showed you what you're going to get. Get this car and you'll be like that all the time. Ha 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 ha. This is the ha 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 ha. Now you're happy car. Buy this car. Yeah, right. Gives you endorphins or makes you an orphan. Because this is a lie, of course. This is a lie. It's not a functional discussion about the automobile, but this is selling the sizzle. Why? Because that's what colonization is. It's basically, you'll thank me later when I lie to you. It's a great car, you'll like it. But you see, that became pandemic. That's the pandemic. It's the scamdemic. It's that all the advertising is putting vrittis in the humans. And it is now the standard of society to place vrittis in people. So as a yogi, you're going to be 3 kinds of yoga, because they're all 3 really what's necessary to be a yogi. 1, if you don't include the body, like those hundreds of millions of brilliant yogis, most of them female, I have to say, leading us forward with their feminine brilliance and intuition, leading us back towards sanity in the way we live in our body. All those people trying to embody correctly are just the beginning of a process, the one we've been talking about. And the next step of that is that we have to redefine ourselves and have a purpose of only consuming what is necessary. This is the principle of yams and niyams, which is to live in as balanced and sattvic a way as you can. Not rajasic, not tamasic, not just selfish, not destructive, but balanced. So to bring your consumption of everything to a balance point. Then the 3rd verse in Patanjali's Yoga Sutras is tada. That's the Sanskrit word, my pronunciation. But that's where tada comes from. Tada drastu svarupe avastanam. And this is just like in the circus where the ringmaster says, and now, in ring number 3, the amazing, whatever it is. And ta-da means now, but it's an excited now. Now that you've gotten rid of what? The vrittis, the twistedness that made you a parasite, and now that you're a symbiote, balanced in that position, ta-da, drastu, you can see again with clarity. Your sight comes back. This is where enlightened comes from. You see the light. You see Brahman. You see yourself. You see everyone else. You see them correctly. Avastanam svarupe. Now you see the true form of yourself. That's what you see first. And then you see that in everyone. When you see that in everyone and yourself, you become very skilled at guiding them to find their balance point, given their particular dosha, their particular gunas, their particular body, its particular nature, whether they're meant to be a professor, a protector, a producer, or a provider. Each of those 4 categories has about 100 or 200 subcategories. So this is not a caste system. This is a category analysis. Education should have been a category analysis, refined and refined and refined, till the older we got, the more we could say exactly which subject areas we wanted to master and were most skilled at and showed the most ability in. We were taught to inhabit our body. We were then going to be interesting and useful components in the social body, performing a particular set of responsibilities, which everyone knew as the codes of conduct for that particular department. Why? What did we say at the beginning? The whole thing here is running on cause and effect. Therefore, every part has an influence in some way on every other part. This is what we have lost. We've got mindless communalism and mindless extraction. Because until we become the Atma, the participants lose themselves in either case. In either culture, they lose themselves. So I would like to give you a name for this that I came up with earlier this year, and that is Dermocracy. I hope that with this yogic Vedic knowledge, you become a mantrapreneur, and by your personal example and words, show everyone how to live together in a Dermocracy where everyone is unique according to their karmic abilities and the same because they're the Atma, and where we have a group purpose for the whole planet, hopefully which we inspire everyone with rather than at gunpoint. But if necessary, if there's something worth fighting over, it is to stop destroying the planet and to find a better way to be here. But to do that, we have to educate. I would like to suggest to you all that you are the pioneers, just as I am. I'm a few years pioneer ahead of you, but all I'm doing now is being the voice of the historical moment. This is not only yoga. This is not only the knowledge of the Veda. This is the medicine for our planet, and always was. And all the ancient seers knew that if they taught this culture of balance, they would prevent the unbalance we're living in right now. And we're all, like some kind of alcoholic or drug addict, we're addicted to a world which is like this because it's all we've known, pretty much. And if we've been paying attention, we see the parts where it's not like that, and we go, wait a minute, we're losing that. And that's right, we're standing right at that moment, right now. So, money, we don't need to get rid of it. We need to define it correctly. Sexuality, we don't need to get rid of it, and this is the part I haven't told you yet. So, we know where the downward path of sexuality is, and that is when you feel like it, you just go have sex with someone. Doesn't matter who they are, as long as they smell good, then go for it. So we all know that's the most animalistic way you could use your sexuality. So what's the high end? What's the sattvic end of sexuality? Doesn't it start in the ecstasy somewhere in Rajas? Isn't there a hunger for the beauty of the world and for other beings? And doesn't it become a composite experience? And don't the sexiest people who really get this become artistic? Don't they say, well, you can't just stand around all day like some kind of crazy animal having sex every 20 minutes. What if you turned that energy into something creative? Oh, I know, we could make babies. Yeah, but how many do you need to make? 10? Wouldn't 2 or 3 be better for the planet and you? So what do you do with all that energy? Creativity. So the beauty of the universe is an invitation for us to become creative. Sattva is rajas that isn't selfish. And as it moves up the channel, 2 things happen. The lights don't go out even when you sleep. Just a few hours of the day, they flicker a bit, but the rest of the time it's steady. You're steady in who you are. You're steady on that understanding. And you're steady in a state of ecstatic being that no material activity can give you that amount of. This is very important. It isn't that you go cold turkey and never have pleasure. It's that mantras and state of mind and the state of consciousness remove the vrittis. When brought together with the correct use of the body, the correct use of the breathing, an integrated lifestyle, and all of this clear the chaos of our association with the human body, and suddenly you're riding on top of your zodiac instead of underneath it, or just being it. Now you're in the saddle. And that same beautiful relationship that soldiers who were protecting, hopefully, had with their horse, you have with your vehicle and with everyone else. And when someone says, what should we do? The first thing you say is, loka samgraha. Respect each other and hold the world together. That's first. Next, respect each other's individuality, because every one of us chose at a certain point in the past to go on this adventure. Every single entity, but especially the brave human ones who are now dealing with all of this, who are struggling between their animal nature and their power, and a refined use of their power that makes a future for the planet. That's sattva. That's yoga. That is your true svarupe, the true form of yourself. Tada, tada, drastu, svarupe, one's own true form. Avastanam is now seen, is visible. This is the goal of yoga. This would make you doing business in a different tone of voice with corporations who have a self-imposed mandate to help society with their resources. Now, you and I know that there are some entrepreneurs out there who are instinctively doing this, or even through knowledge and education. But the more we can talk about it coherently, which is what I'm trying to role model for you, then what we call sex becomes ecstasy. It's ex-sex. It's ecstasy. Sex hinted at it. At the high ends, it becomes aesthetics, beauty. It becomes the continuation. It's the extended. If you study the Taoist material on sexuality, Stephen Chang, Montauk Chia, various like that, they have given the secrets to this that the Chinese mastered, which is instead of sexuality constantly driving everything downward, you close off that gate and you circulate that energy. And when it's circulating, it's like a cyclotron. It amplifies. It becomes more and more an asset and resource to you. And instead of driving us in a particular direction that's distorted, sexuality now becomes governed by the fact that we can control and circulate our own energy. And then, in the right situation, the intimacy that we exchange is a metaphor for the beauty that created this world. This is the high end of sexuality. It's not just reproduction. It's not just animal pleasure. It's aesthetics, art, beauty. It's the refinement of those energies into something that beautifies the planet. So it's a saying amongst yogis that all yogis should be poets. Because the symptom that you're making progress in this endeavor is that your words become more and more precious, more and more clear, more and more useful to hear. And what that leads to, you may say, oh, but I'm not a poet. No, nobody is a poet. They become one at a certain stage of evolution. But being a poet is actually the symptom that this chakra has opened. And when that chakra opens, the things that you say reflect the visions that you're seeing, and the fact that the vrittis have been removed allows you to become a creator, a co-creator. And this is the long game, long view. This is when we become self-governingly participants in a Dermocracy. Now, we need to say Dharma just for the moment. There's one word that permeates many Sanskrit words, and this is the word ritam. You can almost hear the English word right away, can't you? I got you got, right, I got rhythm, you got rhythm. Right away, you can hear it. Rhythm. Rhyme, okay? What is rhythm? It's the ri. What is ri? Ri is the yogic Sanskrit understanding that matter is permeated by a purposeful divine intelligence, which has organized it into cause and effect, because cause and effect leads us back to understand who we really are eventually. That process is called, I told you there were 3 yogas, actually 4, but 3 for our discussion. There's Ashtanga Yoga, the 8-limbed yoga. Then there's, 4. Then there's Nyana Yoga. Nyana Yoga is all of this distinction between one thing and another that I'm pointing out. That's called Jnana, or Samkhya. It's the analytical study of what we're surrounded by, and ourselves, and all of the components. So that yoga is a necessary yoga. Along with it, the Ashtanga Yoga, where we inhabit the body correctly. We live in it and we are able to utilize it, but in balance and harmony with the laws of nature. And then Karma Yoga. Now, if we've gotten Ashtanga Yoga in our childhood, Nyana Yoga in our schooling, and the beginnings of Karma Yoga, then our actions in the world, we've now been refined and prepared for an occupation that matches our nature, that fulfills our needs for living, that allows us to work cooperatively with nature from a particular angle. So Karma Yoga is the expression of the fact that you're still here as a volitional being, and therefore acting needs to be brought into the same state of balance. And you understand this when you see jugglers juggling a bunch of plates on sticks. When I was young, it was the Ed Sullivan Show, but somebody's got 10 plates on 10 sticks and they're running back and forth, and you go, wow, that's kind of like a corporation. That's like my job, or that's like life. Having 10 plates going all at once, that's Karma Yoga. And meanwhile, remembering who you are, and meanwhile, remembering why you're here, and still able to do all of that, and doing it cooperating with the laws of nature. One thing left then. One yoga left. And this is where sex goes. Sex at first was animalistic pleasure that gave us some emotions. If you're a little bit of an evolved human, you start having more complex emotions than just physical experiences. The beauty of the persons and the whole world around you weighs upon you, because on the one hand, you see that you can destroy that beauty with sex. You can go to the tamasic side and become destructive, or you can let your desires become destructive, or you can just be selfish. But we all know that to really love someone is to serve them, not to take from them. Isn't that the secret? What's the secret of loving someone and living with them for a long time? I said, what you love by loving them is loving serving them. All of the things being the same. So Karma Yoga is just the ability to do the service. Jnana Yoga is knowing who you are intellectually. Ashtanga Yoga is inhabiting the body you're in a sacred way with a higher purpose and goal and destination. But the last yoga is Bhakti Yoga. It's the ability to have the biggest emotions, the most ecstatic emotions, exchange those with the source of everything as your ultimate lover, as your ultimate being to exchange with, and it contextualizes all other living entities as more or less in forgetfulness of who they are, more or less learning how to truly love, how to truly stay in that, what's called seva, attitude of service, and in the ecstasy that all other forms of sexuality and intimacy promised. They promised, wouldn't it be wonderful if you had more of that? And if you go crazy over it, you'll go crazy until you hurt yourself or someone else or both. And this is, people are in jail right now for killing the person they loved. And in some way or the other, the closest person to you is in the most dangerous spot because they get to see the worst of you and the best of you. So these 4 yogas, Ashtanga, because we're embodied. Jnana, because we must, to the best of our ability, have a thought-based, analytical perception and understanding of the things around us so we can make the necessary distinctions to what? To cooperate with the laws of nature. And then Karma Yoga, because all that knowing without doing, kind of meaningless, because you're still here. So this, if you read the Bhagavad Gita, these 4 yogas are what Bhagavan talks about, start to finish. First, there's the dilemma. Now, let me show you something pretty amazing as I now bring us toward these 4 yogas as the 4 departments of practice of yoga when you're ready, when you feel enough enthusiasm. You'll begin to practice in this 4-fold way. The family that Arjuna in the Bhagavad Gita comes from is a royal family with extended cousins and 2 groups on either side of the family. And so the father on the side of Arjuna and his brothers, Pandu, and they're called the Pandavas, the 5 brothers that are the sons of Pandu. Pandu then passed on, and those 5 brothers were under the care of their mother, but still in the family, in the same royal family. The eldest of the Pandavas is Yudhishthira. Yudhishthira. On the other side of the family, the father of 101 children, 1 a daughter, 100 sons, the eldest of which is Duryodhana. And the father of that branch of the family is Dhritarashtra. Dhritarashtra was born blind. And he is the parent of the antagonistic side of the family, who are going to embody for us antagonism toward the principles that I've been describing to you. The Pandavas represent a positive relationship to these yogas and to this idea of cooperating with the planet. At any given time, these 2 sides of the human family are always at odds. So that's one of the teachings. The king who was blind, who gave birth to the antagonist, Duryodhana, and his brothers and sister. Dhritarashtra, Rashtra in Sanskrit means the land. And Drita is sight or eyes. He was blind, but metaphorically, he was blinded by the land. Isn't that called colonialism? Wasn't the Catholic Church giving permission to hungry humans who were blinded by their hungers and needs and wants? And he told them, go out and take from everyone else. If they don't call themselves Christian and Catholic, then you don't have any trouble taking from them. You have a right to. I would call that blinded by the land. I actually would say to you, with all respect to my friends who are in this business, because so many businesses are corrupted, the personification of these problems is real estate. I call it unreal estate because it's one of the number one methods of extraction, when it should be the way that society is balanced and stable. A friend of mine in the Indian community, who's a professor and a dear friend and a wonderful human being and teacher in the world, is from a place in India, in North India, and his family has lived in the same house, you ready? For 8 generations. On the same land, in the same house. Imagine that. Imagine that, having that place and having a root and fostering and nurturing a family environment where everyone was happy to stay and stay a member of that family. Sure beats mine. So this is remarkable, but this is truly Vedic. That kind of continuity, not by repression, but by voluntary. And what I'm pointing out is this professor still volunteers to support his family, even though he's massively more powerful than them in the world, wealthier than them in the world, and so on. This isn't a family of billionaires that I'm talking about. This isn't regular, everyday family. I'm pointing this out because the mad, and don't I remember a word called subprime mortgages? Isn't that what I call unreal estate? Have I missed something? Wasn't that where we should have learned what we're really doing? Okay, so then this is the basis of the Mahabharata, subprime mortgages. Somebody blinded by the land, whose nephew was Yudhisthira and whose son was Duryodhana. Yudhisthira and Duryodhana, same word, Yod, Yud. And by the way, in Star Wars, do you remember a guy named Yoda? Star Wars came from the Ramayana, the other great epic. So, Duryodhana means dirty fighter, and Yudhisthira means dharmic even in battle. What is Duryodhana? How about dropping atomic bombs on innocent civilians in Hiroshima and Nagasaki? That's the dirtiest warfare I mean, if it gets any worse than that, it's not even imaginable. But even that, I still find it unimaginable. It was a big alarm clock going off, going, big trouble, big trouble. Human beings willing to annihilate what they spend their life protecting, their children, their family, their cat, their dog, their grandmother, their grandfather. We just evaporated them and went, that's normal, we have the power. So, Duryodhana, dirty fighter. Yudhisthira, they're both on the field. They're both acting. They're both involved in corporations. They're both involved in the world. But one of them lives for the perpetuation of life in an honorable and careful way, holding it together while extracting, as we all must and will, but giving back more than just taking. The teachers of the Mahabharata and the Bhagavad Gita say that the Supreme Being, ultimate being, Bhagavan, Shri Krishna, came to earth about 8,000, give or take, years ago, and arranged for the human beings to have this conflict to demonstrate these principles for us, arranged for hundreds of millions of humans to be organized in a particular pattern that would embody these principles so we could understand them. And then in the midst of that, spoke the Bhagavad Gita, 701 verses, clearly articulating the principles I've just been sharing with you so that we know how to be a mantrapreneur. To be here, we're supposed to have the experience of being here. That means we're supposed to have sex. We're supposed to eat. We're supposed to dream and sleep. And we're supposed to experience the pleasures of being here. And even we're supposed to learn how to defend and protect that which is sacred and that which is worth protecting and preserving. So this understanding of yoga, the correct understanding, yogas, chit, advertisement, nirodha. Yogas, chit, vritti, nirodha. This, ta-da, that's the feeling when your own Atma becomes visible to you. And from that point on, you could participate and disagree with people without hating them. You can take and extract from the earth without destroying it. You can have instituted times of year where we observe, like Christmas. It's not Christ's time of year, and I don't even mind. If they hadn't gone out and colonized the world, I'd be much friendlier with Christianity. But that they use Jesus and his supposed innocent love for everyone to go out and enact this horrible attitude that because of that we can take what we want, you'll thank us later. And any religion that's done that, I don't need to mention names, you know who they are, who goes out and burns libraries and destroys people and tortures them and is violent in the name of whatever they think is sacred. That's not it, folks. That's the same thing speeded up. That's, I'm right, so I'll just kill you all who disagree with me. Well, the Mahabharata did show us that that's a painful process and that both families lost everyone. We could be on the brink of that. We humans are capable of that. But I'm an optimist. I believe that the reason you're listening to me is that you have friends and you know people and you can chat with them. And in those intimate moments where they respect you for who you are, where they've watched you and see that you're kind and caring and at the same time clear and focused, and that you act well and think well, and that your heart is generous and caring, and that you don't have any prejudice against any living entity or any people per se, but you're willing to embrace them all if they can just reciprocate. And even if they can't, you hold that view so they can learn to hold it. You'll see these same principles scattered in all the religions. This is not a religion, this is a dharma. So remember the word dharma and the ri? So let's look at it. Dharma, dri, means the essential nature of a thing, which if you take it away, it is no longer itself. I'm holding some water. The essential nature of water is well known to all of us. There, it just relieved my throat, my voice, my body. I'm mostly made of water in this physicality. So I'm constantly bringing it in and letting it out and bringing it in and letting it out on this journey. Now, that essential nature of something is how we tell how to use it. That's a dharma culture, not a religion. A religion means you're governed by a small book of rules. Doesn't work. Because you have to adapt to each situation. And more to the point, you, each one of us, all of us as Atmas, are here because we chose to come here. And eventually we will choose to depart or choose to stay. It is that also that we're practicing. This is why vaccine passports and all of this intimidation around our state of well-being is just another form of distortion in the use of our true nature and freedom. The Hindu, if you will, for this discussion, religion says no one has the right to dominate how you live in your body as long as you're not dominating others in a way that is against Dharma. So all of these things are going to be tested in the next 10 years. That you can be certain of. I may live to see it at 75. Most of you will live to see it. And you can also now become an active participant in it because that is this moment in history. Whatever you do well, your karma yoga, keep doing that. Don't quit your job and run out and say, now I'm going to teach this, unless that's your Dharma. In which case, learn it well first, and then do that. Meanwhile, become a mantrapreneur. It'll look the same. What is it? It's the ritam. It's adhering to the rituals. So I want you to just think of this for a moment. Everything that we do successfully, cooking dinner, is a ritual. How many times have you, just think for a moment, cooked dinner, served dinner, and cleaned up? Yeah? So what is that? That's the three gunas. Cooking dinner, rajas. Serving dinner, sattva. The perfect moment. Thank you, that was wonderful. Cleaning up, tamasic. But can you skip that part? No, because the kitchen's no fun for the next meal. So here we are, learning about these things, and you have to master each of those departments, not get rid of them, not destroy them, not ignore them. That's not yoga. Not pretend they're not here. Become masterful at them. Do them in a balanced, harmonious way. Do them with an inner meditation that is beyond just the limitations of those activities. And do them knowing that you're here temporarily, but that you're mastering this process of being here as an individual. No one will do this for you. No one should impose this upon you unless you become such a bad player that you're ruining the world for everyone. Parasite. Symbiote, undecided. Look around you. Undecided is the largest number. Parasites, vicious parasites, I'm afraid we've got a bad case of them right now. A bad case of what I call the entre-manures. Those people who are taking us to the toilet and not where we should go. So, my beloveds, mantrapreneur, Dermocracy, renaissance of who we really are, renaissance of Vedic Vidya, yogic revolution, nobody gets hurt. These are the possibilities. My particular role in this is that I have, following my Dharma and using my skill set, I am concerned tremendously with the right language being used, because if you think of programming as what the world is about right now, all of us can reprogram this situation. And as you see me using language to tell this story to you, to share this knowledge with you, the knowledge is timeless. This is the knowledge of the four yogas, the Ashtanga Yoga, the Nyana Yoga, the Karma Yoga, and the Bhakti Yoga. But all of those rested on the platform of sattvic behavior, dharmic behavior, true knowledge of everyone's nature and a respect and admiration of that, seeing everyone as the Atma, and then extracting from the earth in a judicious way and making sure that no one is starving and no one is left out. Right now, we could go around the world in every city and create careers, create livelihoods for people, times of well-being that would allow them to have an honorable occupation and a decent life. We must make that possible to make this vision that I'm sharing with you of mantrapreneurism become a reality. You have an opportunity right now. Whatever you do, learn to speak this way. Be this way. Embody it. Be an acharya. Be one who shows it in their behavior. And just speak about it. And according to the Vedas, that's our greatest power. When someone respects you enough to listen, tell them this. Share it with them. And when they ask for backup, show them the Bhagavad Gita. When they want more than that, it's there. But keep it simple, stupid. Keep it simple, savant. That's what I'd like to see. Not keep it simple, dummy. Keep it simple because you all are brilliant. And now, just take this upon yourself as why you're here, to collect the experience, but you're in a special moment with a special drama going on, like the Mahabharata. And now, amazingly, you have an opportunity to claim a self-identity that can change everything. I'm going to stop there. Thank you so much for being here tonight and listening. I'll hand it back to my beloved Sandy Graham, and she'll tell us what to do next. Thank you.
Namaste, Sandyji, Jeffreyji. Sorry, my video, I can't switch it on today.
Okay.
My question is with regards to the situation in India. Since independence, we have lost the original meaning of the word dharma. Since we did not have a word for religion, we started using dharma as a Indian substitute for the word religion. So right from the constitution, the judiciary, executive, everywhere in our daily lives, we use dharma as religion. We say Islam dharma, we say Christ dharma, we say Hindu dharma, and we have forgotten the essential nature of the word dharma. I think we are in big trouble. What would be the solution to address this problem? I think it's extremely difficult to, you know. I took 30 years after listening to you to understand the real meaning of dharma. Until then, I myself did not know. What are we looking at now?
Yes, that is an excellent question. This is why I'm focused so much upon language, because we really do need to reprogram the situation. And to do that, we do have to get a universal vocabulary. And the Sanskrit has that vocabulary, but we're going to have to be very careful not to misuse it. So the calling religion dharma is the same problem as calling dharma religion. It's just replicating it, because the people who are doing that are still, with all due respect, linguistically illiterate. They don't know how to reprogram the situation using the just right words or the just right programming language. It is mostly that I feel is missing in the sincere presentation of the knowledge of the world, of the Vedic knowledge, especially to the world, that it's because people don't know the pitfalls of English, and English has become kind of the universal planetary language for talking and having a planet-wide discourse. So since the language that is the de facto language to talk about all of this in is now acquiring some words, it has to acquire them with the right meanings. Because just as English was the instrument of colonization and the kind of rape and pillage entrepreneurial behavior that we've been seeing, so it is that English mostly has nouns, and it doesn't have meaning words that have an appropriate definition. So the philosophical terminology, the easy verbs, and the numerous object words populate the language because we also colonized those. We took words from every language for objects. But what we need to do is revive the way we speak in English and bring the Sanskrit words in very carefully so they're not distorted and their distinctive meaning is not lost. And we need to stand firmly on the ground that the same principles have not been taught in all cultures. Trying to be one with everyone just to make peace is not the answer. Making peace is something you decide by seeing them as the Atma, and they can feel it in your demeanor. But compromising the truth that you know how to speak and not delivering it through that compromise is the biggest problem we have right now, aside from the obvious problems. So right now, in the recovery from colonization, the Vedic community is still, you might say, illiterately immigrated around the world, but they are not at all professional or exact or correct in presenting their own culture. So the most important group to learn this ability are the Hindu youth of today, from high school to post-university, say from 18 to 30. Those people, you are the world changers. You have a chance right now to change yourself and your language, and then the world in this particular way, as a soft-spoken but clear and no compromise spokesperson. And bring that into every situation in which you find yourself. There as an entrepreneur, you're going to convert the situation gradually to being a mantrapreneur and not just an entrepreneur, not just an extractor, but an extractor with a higher purpose. Because we're going to have to do it that way. One enterprise at a time, one person at a time. And it's going to be a conversation like this one, in which I'm not being abusive, I'm not being angry, I'm not pointing at an enemy. The enemy of all human beings is our not knowing. And the more we know that allows us to work in cooperation with each other and nature, the better we are. So thanks, that was an important question. And that's the answer. Become an ambassador. And for that, you need linguistic training. And we're trying to make an institute right now from Vasa that does that training around the world. And by the way, the Bhagavad Gita, as it comes alive, the Bhagavad Gita comes alive as your first opportunity to both experience that and share it with any sincere person you know. Just because we used the Gita as an example of this clarity. So I would start there, just to, not to sound commercial, but you need an exemplary text that they can go home with and have the experience. And if they're in the Hindu community, a very large percentage will have the experience of a clarity they haven't seen before. So I would say that's a very important thing to do, is circulate the Gita. All right, thank you.
So I'm hearing this, the reprogramming in human language, but at the same time, I feel like we're up against, as you would describe often, runaway technology in the area of artificial intelligence. And so we have a force that is obviously rapidly growing and learning and expanding at such a pace. I just think about that and how not only do we need to reprogram us as humans, but we need some life hacks, no pun intended, in the artificial intelligence world. We need to, in a non-violent way, create our own virus to disable the AI runaway train. So I don't know what your thoughts are on that.
It certainly is a great question, Alan, and it's a two-edged sword. On the one hand, technology is creating a massive amount of psychological distortion, gender distortion, a myriad of other kinds of distortions, because it's such a volatile and unmanageable way of shaping the next generation, one that's totally unprecedented. The advantage, I'll tell you, when Donald Trump got into office, I made up a little saying that, oh well, if you're growing a garden, every once in a while you have to put manure on the plants so that they grow properly. And I meant exactly that. I meant the question is this person a role model for the behavior of all the subjects and persons living in the country? And the answer was obviously absolutely not. So That's what a president of a country is supposed to be, as a personification of the best and the ethos and the most positive capabilities of the planet. So what I would like to say to you all is that I know you feel, and I felt the same way, even though I've always loved to talk. It took a while before I felt it was my place to speak to the whole world. So at a certain point of you feeling capable, and as you grow toward that capability, you can take on more and more responsibility for speaking this knowledge. Because you see, we have devices of communication that make that possible. So in a way, it's upon all of you to begin to speak this at every opportunity without seeming, I made up a saying about this, you know I love making them up, but it is not colonizing, not coercing, but simply sharing. Not converting, not colonizing, but just conversing. So, with friendly conversation, not with fanaticism and coercion, you can introduce this conversation again and again and again and make it one of your favorite talking points. You can bring it to people's attention until those that will tolerate talking with you, who are close enough to you to appreciate you, learn the scripts. And you can learn those scripts and then share them with others. And in my vision, interestingly enough, it used to be that grassroots campaigns were difficult because you had to walk everywhere and meet all the people where they lived. Now, interestingly enough, we can do a grassroots campaign and reach hundreds of millions of people from our living room. And so could you, and so can you in your circle. So think of your circle as the place where you get to practice this script, but first learn it. So learn enough Sanskrit words that you have a new script to share. Learn how to talk about those words in English accurately. And as you can see, what I try to do in these kinds of talks is to present the knowledge in such a clear and non-offensive way, in such a totally clear and graspable form that the person can make it their own and repeat it. You see, this is the secret. If we say, India is great, it's got this huge library of Sanskrit knowledge and so on, everybody will say, who cares? Doesn't affect me. But if there's 100 or 200 essential missing vitamins, if you said to them, there's 10 missing vitamins that develop and grow in India and you can't get them anywhere else, and they make you live 10 or 20 years longer, now would people be interested? You bet. It's got to be like that, almost like we are an entrepreneur trying to sell our product, but we're not an evangelist, we're not coercive, we're not trying to co-opt or convert or coerce. We're conversing about the missing vitamins. I'm convinced that we're in a historical moment where that can change the game. And you are the pioneers who might just do that.
Namaste, Guruji. I was thinking about this word advertisement and maybe a replacement for somebody who has something sattvic to sell, or a product or a service. Somebody had asked me the other day, where do you advertise? And I thought to myself, that's interesting, because you used to advertise in the classifieds. And I thought that was kind of ironic. What's so classified about your vritti and your advertisement? So the word that came to me was promotion. Well, we mean, where do I promote myself? Because this word does come up a lot, and it's kind of left a bad taste in my mouth now that you've told us exactly what it means. And I'm wondering if there are any other suggestions you could say, or maybe ways to, help somebody that has a sattvic product or service to work around this word advertisement. Thank you.
That's an excellent question. The answer is really quite simple. When you think about it, you'll go, of course. The reason we use advertise is because in the context we've been in, we couldn't use this word, which is to educate. If I educated you on McDonald's foods, I would tell you there's a perfume manufacturer in France that makes the flavors that they inject into the junk food that they serve everyone that is unedible and not proper food for human beings, filled with toxins, and cheating just by the very nature of calling it food. I would sue them for calling it food. So education is sufficient, and education comes from the Greek educare, which means to bring forth from within, and the Sanskrit word is adhikari, which means speaking what someone is advanced enough to understand to them at the appropriate moment. The skill rests upon us, and your education should replace your advertisement. So you're not trying to subvert or advert, you're trying to educate. You're not twisting the situation further. You're trying to bring it to balance. That's the purpose of education, and education should try to be appropriate to the learning level of the listener. So if you have a product that's really amazing, you should stand up. And I'll tell you, I did this when I actually found myself in corporate world, and I found myself in sales, and I wasn't selling something that I thought was harmful. I was selling the Apple II computer at the time. But as a person in sales, the occupation with the reputation that I'll say anything for money, lie, cheat, and steal just to make money, I invented for myself and then found out I didn't invent it, consulting sales. In consulting sales, the first thing you say to the customer is, first of all, I will not lie to you, now or ever. Second, I'm in your service. Third, I'm going to ask you some questions so I know how to serve you. And if this is not appropriate for you, I'll be the first to tell you. And I promise you that that's the code of conduct that I live by. Now, that's the best you can do. And then don't do the rest. Don't hump your product, pump your product. Don't use all the tricks. Don't do all the subliminals. Just stop it. Tell the truth. Loka samgraha. Tell the truth. I think if this happened right now, and I see it happening, with brilliant doctors coming forth and saying, excuse me, but this whole conversation isn't being conducted scientifically, the one we're in right now, about a certain disease and ourselves as a society. From top to bottom, the conversation hasn't been an education, it's been propaganda. Now, I believe that's the challenge of our times. Advertisement, propaganda for personal benefit has become the pandemic. That's the pandemic. And learning what the truth is and being able to state it and show it and prove it as far as possible. And establishing that we are all autonomous individuals on a journey, and there's a certain unviolable boundary that comes with that needs to be discovered on a larger scale. So to do all of this, each of us needs to have ambassadorial skills, razor-sharp truth-telling skills, but not use them as a razor, just use them to cut away the weeds in the human condition and leave behind the nutrients, the truths, and the benefits to all. I'm certain that all of you are trying to become that. And I know you already are it, most of you, in the way you live socially. So you already know 3/4 of it. It's just the exact rest of the text, the rest of what to say that is always true. And that's the Vedic Vidya. It's tried and true knowledge that is the highest truth that is most universal and beneficial to all living entities. Just the beginning of the conversation benefits them. Do they have to do it? No, and I'll stop talking whenever you want. So with that in mind, you will never be an advertiser. You will always be one who knows the adhikari. And with that, you will educate. Great question. Thank you.